Greetings nerdlings and welcome to Amalgam Nation Presents World of Lorecraft, what I'm going to be calling Charactercraft or Herocraft. I think I'll go with Herocraft. Right? So welcome to Amalgam Nation Presents World of Lorecraft, Herocraft, the Lich King edition. The Lich King is the master and lord of the Scourge, which he rules telepathically from the frozen throne atop the Ice-Crown Glacier. Kil'jaeden created the Lich King from the spirit of the Orcish shaman Ner'zhul to raise an undead army to conquer Azeroth for the Burning Legion. Initially trapped within the frozen throne with Frostborn, the Lich King eventually betrayed Kil'jaeden and merged with the human Artis Menethil. With the destruction of Frostborn and the death of Artis, Bolvar Fordragon took the powers of the Lich King within himself, imprisoning the Master of the Scourge within the Frozen Throne once more. Lich King is the titular antagonist of World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King. He is voiced by Michael McConaughey. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm crap at pronouncing things, as you probably know by now if you're watching a lot of these vids. Birth of the Lich King. When Ner'zhul attempted to escape Draenor, he was immediately apprehended by the Demon Lord Kil'jaeden, who enacted the blood pact that Ner'zhul had sworn many years earlier. Kil'jaeden ravaged and destroyed his body, but kept his spirit alive and encased it in a block of ice from the twisting nether. Kil'jaeden granted him increased power, including that over death itself. Ner'zhul ceased to exist, and the Lich King was created. Formation of the Scourge. The Lich King was sent to Azeroth through the Great Dark Beyond, landing in Northrend where the ice that encased him formed into the shape of a throne, the Frozen Throne. Here he would begin the formation of the undead Scourge and in the process weaken the world in preparation for the Burning Legion. This new army would not fall victim to the petty infighting that had caused the Orcs to fail in conquering Azeroth earlier. Sent to watch over him were the Dreadlords, led by Tychondrius himself. Within the Frozen Throne, the Lich King experimented with his psychic powers and enslaved the local indigenous life forms. The plague of undeath that came from the Frozen Throne transformed each of them into his undead servants. Thus, using his psychic and necromantic powers, he was able to conquer much of Northrend. As he devoured more and more souls, he only grew in power as the individual undead under his control gave him much needed nourishment. Thus his powers began growing at an exponential rate, a fact that the Dreadlords were well aware of and kept a good eye on him. The Lich King entered a war with the kingdom of Azjol Nerub, whose ancient inhabitants were immune to his plague of undeath. The 10-year conflict, known as the War of the Spider, ultimately ended with the Lich King's first major triumph. While the Nerubians were immune to the plague, their corpses could still be reanimated. Lich King was impressed by his enemy, however, and adopted Nerubian architecture for his own, as a testament to the Spider Lord's tenacity and age. Having by now established control over most of Northrend, the Dreadlords urged Ner'zhul to proceed with the agreed-upon plan to prepare the world for the invasion of the Burning Legion. The Lich King then used his telepathy to reach out into Azeroth and summon any dark soul that would hear his call. Kel'Thuzad, a mage and a prominent member of Dalaran's Kirin Tor, answered his call. Kel'Thuzad was soon ensnared by the Lich King, faithfully serving him as the first of the Cult of the Damned, a cult that would worship the Lich King as a god and be taught necromancy to better aid their undead armies. Kel'Thuzad and the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis then were instructed to begin paving the way, but Ner'zhul, ever mindful of Kil'jaeden's scheme, secretly sought a way out of his prison. Scourge of Lordaeron. After preparing for many long months, Kel'Thuzad and his Cult of the Damned finally struck the first blow by releasing the plague upon Lordaeron. Prince Artis Menethil and Lady Jaina Proudmoore, along with Captain Falric, began Lordaeron's search for answers on the new threat. Lordaeron's northernmost settlements were consumed utterly by the plague. As the ranks of the undead swept across Lordaeron, King Tyrannus' only son, Prince Artis Menethil, took up the fight against the undead. As was the Lich King's intention all along, Artis succeeded in killing Kel'Thuzad, but even so, the undead ranks swelled with every soldier that fell defending the land. Frustrated and stymied by the seemingly unstoppable enemy, Artis took increasingly extreme steps to drive them out. He eventually ordered the slaughter of everyone in Stratholme that had been infected by the plague. This most likely included innocent slaughter to prevent Mal'Ganis from adding the citizens to the army of the dead, and strike at Mal'Ganis himself. Artus failed to trap Mal'Ganis, who escaped to Northrend. Finally, Artus's comrades warned him that he was losing his hold on his humanity. Artus's fear and resolve proved to be his ultimate undoing. He tracked the plague's source to Northrend, intending to end its threat forever by killing its supposed leader Mal'Ganis. He stumbled across his longtime friend Myrddin Bronzebeard, brother to the Dwarven King Magni, and the dwarf led him to a legendary weapon they hoped would help them combat the Scourge. Instead, Prince Artus himself fell prey to Lich King's tremendous power. Believing that it would help him save his people, Artus took up the cursed runeblade Frostmourne. Though the sword did grant him great power, the cost was high. Myrddin, or so Artus believed, lay dead, and Artus began to lose his soul, transformed into the first and greatest of the Lich King's Death Knights. Artus finally exacted revenge upon Mal'Ganis, removing one of the Lich King's more dangerous jailers and completing the unholy transformation. With his soul cast aside and his sanity shattered, Artus led the Scourge against his own kingdom, Lordaeron. Artus started the scourging of Lordaeron with the murder of his own father, King Tyrannus Menethil II, and crushed Lordaeron with his newfound unholy strength. Path of the Damned. With Artus as his champion, Ner'zhul spread the plague throughout Lordaeron. What remained of the Order of the Silver Hand struck back, but even mighty Uther fell to the Death Knight's power. On orders from Tichondrius, Artus took the Scourge north to the High Elven kingdom of Quel'Thalas to resurrect the summoner of Archimonde, Kel'Thuzad. The High Elves never stood a chance, and their capital Silvermoon was ravaged. Their millennia-aged Sunwell was warped and used to resurrect Kel'Thuzad as a lich. Thus both masters were appeased. The Lich King's most loyal worshipper was returned, and the summoner was unleashed. Having progressed too far into the Legion's plan, and guarded too closely by Tichondrius to back out now, Ner'zhul's minions laid siege to Dalaran, reclaiming a spellbook of Medivh which contained the incantations needed for Kel'Thuzad to summon Archimonde. Before the summoning, Kel'Thuzad had been reading through the spellbook and noted to Artus that Medivh's knowledge of demons alone was staggering, and that he was far more powerful than anyone had ever realized. Finally, Archimonde was summoned outside Dalaran, and he immediately gave control of the Scourge to Tichondrius and the Dreadlords, but the Lich King was not done yet. Archimonde may have removed Ner'zhul's control over the undead, but in his eagerness for vengeance against the Night Elves, he forgot to return the Frozen Throne to Kil'jaeden. Thus, the Lich King remained at large. During the Legion's invasion of Ashenvale, Illidan Stormrage was released from his Barrow prison after 10,000 years of captivity. Realizing Illidan's addiction to magic and having utilized the Skull of Gul'dan himself years earlier, the Lich King dispatched Artus to Kalimdor. There Artus covertly told Illidan about the powers of the Skull of Gul'dan. Unable to resist such power, Illidan took up the skull and harnessed its vast energies. By doing so, Illidan developed demonic features and vastly magnified power. Illidan, exactly as the Lich King had planned, then proceeded to kill Tichondrius and liberate Felwood. Without Tichondrius' support team, Archimonde's overconfident ascent of Mount Hyjal led to the unexpected, his annihilation. Legacy of the Damned. Bristling with power and free to roam the world once more, Illidan set out to find his own place in the great scheme of things. However, Kil'jaeden confronted Illidan and made him an offer he could not refuse. Kil'jaeden was angered by Archimonde's defeat at Mount Hyjal, but he had greater concerns than vengeance. Sensing that his creation, the Lich King, was out of his control, Kil'jaeden ordered Illidan to destroy Ner'zhul and put an end to the undead Scourge once and for all. In exchange, Illidan would receive untold power and a true place amongst the remaining lords of the Burning Legion. Illidan agreed and immediately set out to destroy the Frozen Throne, the icy crystal cask in which the Lich King's spirit resided. Illidan knew that he would need a mighty artifact to destroy the Frozen Throne. Using the knowledge he had gained from Gul'dan's memories, Illidan decided to seek out the tomb of Sargeras and claim the Dark Titan's remains. Using his vast demonic powers, he lured the Serpentine Naga from their dark undersea lairs. Led by the cunning witch Lady Vosh, the Naga helped Illidan reach the Broken Isles, where Sargeras' tomb was rumoured to be located. With the powerful Eye of Sargeras in his possession, Illidan travelled to the former wizard city of Dalaran. Strengthened by the city's ley energy lines, Illidan used the eye to cast a destructive spell against the Lich King's citadel of Icecrown in distant Northrend. Illidan's attack shattered the Lich King's defences and ruptured the very roof of the world. The Lich King had no defence against this spell, and he would have been forever vanquished that day, but at the final moment Illidan's destructive spell was stopped when his brother Malfurion intervened, sensing that the spell was causing great damage to the world. Civil war in the Plaguelands. Now that Ner'zhul had openly defied the will of the Legion, he knew that the wrath of Kil'jaeden and his demonic lackeys would be fierce, and at the worst possible time Ner'zhul was losing his magical power. When he had pushed Frostmourne from the throne, he had caused a crack within the icy cask. Illidan's spell had caused this crack to worsen, and now the Lich King's powers were rapidly seeping out like blood from an open wound. Halfway across Azeroth, residing over the unholy remains of his father's kingdom, Arthas was losing power as well. His powers came directly from the frozen throne, through his blade Frostmourne, and his hold over the undead was also slipping. Ner'zhul knew that his time was short. Imprisoned within the frozen throne, he suspected correctly that Kil'jaeden would send his agents to destroy him. Desperate to save himself, he called his greatest mortal servant to his side, the Death Knight King Arthas. Though his powers were drained by the Lich King's weakness, Arthas had been involved in a civil war in Lordaeron. Half of the standing undead forces, led by the Banshee Sylvanas Windrunner, had been freed by the Lich King's sudden loss of influence and resented what they had become. Also, another group of undead was still under control of the Legion's remaining commanders, the three Dreadlords, Varamatras, Detarok, and Balnazar. Arthas, called by the Lich King, was forced to leave the scourge in the hands of his lieutenant, Kel'Thuzad, as the war escalated throughout the Plaguelands. Ultimately, Sylvanas and her rebel undead, known as the Forsaken, claimed the ruined capital city of Lordaeron as their own. Consuming the old sewers beneath the wrecked capital city, the Forsaken vowed to defeat the scourge and drive Kel'Thuzad and his minions from the land. The Lich King was powerless to stop them. Weakened but determined to save his master, Arthas reached Northrend, only to find Illidan's Naga and Blood Elves waiting for him. He and his Nerubian allies, in the form of crypt fiends led by the fallen Spider Lord Anubarak, raced against Illidan's forces to reach the Icecrown Glacier and defend the frozen throne. The Lich King triumphant. Arthas, with Anubarak's help, battled his way through their forces until faced with Prince Kael'thas, who challenged him. Kael'thas used the fact that Jaina now hated Arthas to make him hesitant, and fought with his father's reforged runeblade, Fellow Malorn, or Flamestrike. Flamestrike clashed against Frostmourne, but in the end Arthas forced Kael'thas to flee, leaving the path open. He then proceeded to magically activate the 4 Icecrown obelisks around the glacier, opening the doors to the frozen throne. However, Illidan was waiting for him. An intense battle commenced in which Illidan displayed his newfound demonic powers and nearly defeated Arthas. Until coming in for the finishing blow, he inadvertently left himself open and Arthas quickly took advantage of it, slicing open the demon hunter's chest. Illidan collapsed, grievously wounded. Arthas then turned towards the open doors of Icecrown, leaving Illidan on the ground instead of finishing him. Rather, before he walked away, Arthas warned Illidan to leave Azeroth and never return. Arthas entered the hollow glacier and beheld a winding pinnacle chained to the ice. As he strode up the stairs towards his destiny, the voices of those he had forsaken flooded through his mind. First he heard again Uther warning him, if we allow our passions to turn to bloodlust, then we will become as vile as the orcs. Then he heard again more angry remarks from Uther and Moradin, as well as his own responses to them. Yet he ignored them, continuing his ascent. Finally he reached the pinnacle, and before him he saw an icy cask, within which was a suit of armour, arranged as if seated on a massive throne. Now only 2 voices spoke to him, Medivh's previous warning to Jaina and the rasping whisper of Ner'zhul. Your young prince will find only death in the cold north. Return the blade, complete the circle, release me from this prison. With a great cry of strength, Arthas brought the might of Frostmourne to bear against the Lich King's icy prison, and with a haunting scream, the frozen throne exploded, and shards of the crystal scattered on the ground. With Ner'zhul's thorny helm at his feet, Arthas leaned forward, picked it up and then placed the unimaginably powerful artifact on his head. Now Ner'zhul's voice echoed within his mind and throughout the chamber. We are one. In that moment, Ner'zhul and Arthas' spirits fused into a single mighty being, just as the Lich King had always planned, and thus one of the most powerful entities on Azeroth was born. After the merger, the Lich King sat dormant for several years while storms raged across Northrend and his minions constructed Icecrown Citadel around the Frozen Throne. While the Lich King dreamt the various personas in his mind, the Death Knight Arthas Mental, the Orc Shaman Ner'zhul, and Matthias Lenner, the personification of the remnants of Arthas' humanity, fought for influence and control over the entity. It is noticeable that, if arranged accordingly, Matthias Lenner is an anagram for Arthas Mental. Matthias tried to reason with Arthas, but Arthas killed him by running him through with Frostmourne. Ner'zhul was delighted by this, declaring that he and Arthas were now free to merge into a single glorious being. Arthas rejected this offer, stating that once he had the power of the Lich King, no one would tell him what to do again. He impaled the stunned Ner'zhul with Frostmourne, becoming the dominant personality of the Lich King and ending the dream. Awakening. When the Lich King awakened, he silenced his own heart, believing that anything that made him at all mortal made him weak. Afterwards, he journeyed to Sindragosa's Fall, where he raised the ancient dragon Sindragosa, the first consort of Malygos, as a frostworm, that then watched his massive undead army prepare for war, attacking Horde and Alliance. The capitals of Azeroth began receiving mysterious packages with infected grain. As their citizens ate grain from the infected packages, they were turned into bloodthirsty ghouls, if not treated by members of the Argent Dawn. With all the major capitals thrown into chaos, necropoli appeared around the world, triggering a second Scourge War. Adventurers from both the Alliance and the Horde fought back the disease and the advancing Scourge armies. Outraged by this treachery, War Chief Thrall, with his fellow Horde leaders, and King Varian Wrynn planned an invasion on Northrend to deal with the Lich King once and for all. The final straw occurred when the Lich King directly attacked the capitals of the Horde and the Alliance. Orgrimmar and Stormwind were attacked by large Scourge armies consisting of frostworms and abominations. The battles for Stormwind and Orgrimmar were won by the brave adventurers and their leaders once more, thus forming the Horde expedition and the Alliance vanguard. These attacks were intended to lure powerful heroes to Northrend, where the Lich King sought to corrupt them and use them against their own people, in a reflection of Arthas' own journey. Fall of the Scarlet Enclave. Not content to just lure the champions of Azeroth into his service, the Lich King decided to remove all the anti-Scourge presence within the Plaguelands. To this end, he created a new order of Death Knights. This new order was led by High Lord Darian Mograine and successfully forced the Scarlet Crusade from Lordaeron, with the survivors becoming the Scarlet Onslaught and heading to Northrend. During the battle, he sensed an old enemy that he long ago destroyed, but was content to ignore it for the time being. Battle for Light's Hope Chapel. Empowered by the destruction of the Scarlet Crusade, the Scourge prepared to attack Light's Hope Chapel and destroy the Argent Dawn. Despite the odds, the Argent Dawn won against the army of Damned, largely thanks to the arrival of Tyrion Fordring. The spirit of Alexandros Mograine, the original Ashbringer, appeared to speak with his defeated son Darion. The Lich King then took to the field himself, sealing away Alexandros' soul. Realizing how he had been betrayed, Darion attacks the Lich King, only to be swatted aside. Fordring comes forward in preparation to battle the Lich King. Lich King incapacitates him, stating that sacrificing a small army of Death Knights was a small price to pay to draw Tyrion out of hiding. Lord Maxwell Tyrosus gives the order to attack, and while the remaining defenders of the light charge the Lich King, they are easily blasted away. Having heard from the Lich King himself of why he would throw away Darion and the Death Knights under his command, Darion uses Arthas' focus on Tyrion against him and throws the corrupted Ashbringer to Fordring. The combination of Fordring's own fate and the holy ground of Light's Hope cleanses the Ashbringer, restoring the sword to its original glory. With this new power, Tyrion escapes the Lich King's spell and strikes him with the Holy Sword. Stunned by this turn of events, the Lich King retreats after promising that the next time he meets Fordring, it will not be on holy ground. This battle led to the creation of the two of the Lich King's greatest enemies, Tyrion Fordering's Argent Crusade, a combination of the Argent Dawn and Silver Hand, and Darion Mograin's Knights of the Ebon Blade, an order of Death Knights who broke free from the Lich King's control. The Ratgate. Members of the Horde and the Alliance fighting at the siege of Angrthar the Ratgate formed the Temporary Alliance, focusing their attacks on the Scourge instead of each other. With the Dragonflights providing aerial support, both factions made a daring attack on the gate, seizing control from the Scourge. There, Bolvar Fordragon and Saurfang the Younger taunted the Lich King to fight his own battles instead of sending his minions. The Lich King entered the battle and quickly slew Saurfang the Younger. Before Bolvar and the Lich King could trade blows, Grand Apothecary Putris, chief of the Forsaken's Royal Apothecary Society and the creator of the New Plague, betrayed the Horde and unleashed his plague on the combatants below. The plague killed most of the Alliance, Horde and Scourge forces at the Ratgate indiscriminately, including Bolvar Fordragon. The Lich King was injured and forced to retreat. This betrayal and the battle for the Undercity that followed ended upwards of 7 years of Cold War between the Horde and the Alliance. Fall of the Lich King. After the Argent tournament ended with the death of Anubarak, the Argent Crusade, led by High Lord Tyrion Fordring, struck an alliance with the Knights of the Ebon Blade, led by High Lord Darion Mograin. Thus the Ashen Verdict was born, a combination of opposing orders for a common purpose: the final assault against the Scourge in Icecrown Citadel and the eventual fall of the Lich King. After intelligence spoke of an opening directly to the Lich King's private chambers, Jaina Proudmoore led adventurers from the Alliance, while Sylvanas Windrunner led adventurers from the Horde into the Frozen Halls. While Jaina hoped to find a little trace of Artus left in the Lich King, Sylvanas planned to simply sneak past all of the Lich King's defences while he was preoccupied with the Ashen Verdict invasion and claim her revenge. Once inside, they discovered that the Lich King had left Frostmourne unattended within the Halls of Reflection. Both Jaina and Sylvanas attempted to speak with the spirits of the Blade in an attempt to find the Lich King's weakness, and both were met by the spirit of Uther the Lightbringer. Uther warned that the Lich King could see what Frostmourne saw and was on his way. Uther finally told them that any trace of Artus was simply a fading presence inside the Lich King's mind, that to destroy him he must be slain at the place where Artus merged with Ner'zhul at the top of the frozen throne. Finally, Uther revealed that after the Lich King is slain, someone must take his place. Without a master to keep them in check, the vast armies of the Scourge would indiscriminately swarm across Azeroth. When the Lich King arrived in the hall, he banished Uther's soul back into Frostmourne and called his loyal captains Falric and Merwyn to deal with the intruders. He returned to his private chambers, followed by Sylvanas and Jaina. Once the adventurers defeated the captains, their respective leaders, unable to do any meaningful harm to the Lich King, ordered them to flee. Seemingly trapped, they made a final stand before their respective gunships. The Skybreaker and Orgrim's Hammer arrived to carry them to safety. Champions of the Argent tournament, led by Tyrion Fordring, stormed Icecrown Citadel and defeated the Lich King's mightiest servants. Atop the spire, the Lich King encased Tyrion in a block of ice, forcing him to watch helplessly as his champions battled the Lich King and his minions. Eventually, the Lich King effortlessly killed all the adventurers with a single devastating attack. The Lich King revealed that he had been waiting for Tyrion's assault all along, knowing that he would bring with him Azeroth's greatest heroes, who could then be killed and resurrected as powerful masters of the Scourge. Every obstacle he had laid before them was merely part of his test. Now certain Tyrion's champions were the greatest fighting force this world has ever known. The Lich King began to raise the fallen heroes. Before he could finish, Fordring, calling for a final blessing from the light, managed to break free and shatter Frostmourne with his own sword, Ashbringer, much to the Lich King's shock. The spirits who had been trapped within Frostmourne, including King Tyrannus Menethil II, attacked their former jailer by suspending him in the air while simultaneously resurrecting Fourth Ring's champions, who were then able to defeat the Lich King. Tyrannus' spirit held Artus in his arms as he died, then informed Tyrion that the Scourge must always have a master to control them, before vanishing in the wind. Tyrion picked up the Lich King's crown and prepared to take on the burden of becoming the new Lich King, when he was stopped by the voice of Bolvar Fordragon. The undead paladin sat upon the frozen throne, having been horribly burned by dragon fire and tortured by Artus. Bolvar said that he no longer had any place in the world of the living, while Tyrion still had duties to perform. As his final act of service, Bolvar would take the powers of the Lich King within himself, imprisoning the Master of the Scourge once more and keeping the undead legions in check. Tyrion reluctantly placed the crown of the Lich King on Bolvar's head as the ice of the frozen throne began to envelop him. Bolvar, now the new Lich King, told Tyrion to tell the world that the Lich King is dead, and as his voice changed to one similar to the Lich King, added that Bolvar Fordragon died with him. Thank you for watching, and as always remember, play to game and game to play.